Brittany. Thanks, Brittany. Perfect. Before I pass over to Brittany Smith to introduce our awesome speaker today, did want to give a quick plug for AF Roanoke in case y'all are unfamiliar and this is your first time experiencing AF Roanoke event. My name is Ryan McBurney. I am the AF Roanoke president. I work for a company, a digital agency called Interactive Strategies that's based in DC, but I work remotely in Roanoke, so it's been amazing to plug into the Roanoke community through AAF. And community is really the key word, how I would describe AAF Roanoke. We are a local community looking to elevate our industry locally, regionally, and nationally through connection, through advocacy, through professional growth. And an event like this is really a great example of the professional growth we can offer marketing professionals, advertising professionals across the spectrum of experience and expertise. So yeah, thanks again for coming and attending today, and I'll pass over to Brittany.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. So my name is Brittany Smith. I'm the programs chair for AAF Roanoke this year. I also work for the YMCA of Virginia's Blue Ridge. And through the YMCA, I met Rodrigua Ross. I've had the opportunity to hear her speak at quite a few state conferences, and her spark of joy and brightness and her storytelling made me think of her immediately when we were talking about this event. So I'll let you all know a little bit about Rodrigua here and her expertise and her experience, and then I will turn it over. So Rodrigua Ross, she's the Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging for the YMCA of Southampton Roads. So for those who may not know, that's out towards the beach. She has over 24 years of experience in various leadership roles. A passionate advocate for access-deficient communities, Rodrigua specializes in embedding equity strategies within organizations. She has led initiatives addressing youth development, food security, and public health, and she hosts the podcast Causenetic. Rodrigua holds a BA in political science with an MBA focused on strategic leadership, and she's also the president and CEO of her own consulting firm, Dreaming Out Loud. So thank you so much, Rodrigua, for joining us today, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Brittany. Thank you, Ryan, for your leadership in this space. And thank you, AAF, for considering me and you all for spending time. I know this is your lunch and learn. I don't feel no ways if you decide to eat, but if dessert is involved, please do forward me samples, please and thank you. But feel free to eat. We're going to have a good time. It's going to be conversational, and hopefully at the end of our time together, I will have imparted a few nuggets for you to use in your daily work. So couple of caveats. I am working off multiple screens. So if you see me looking around, I'm not lying. I promise. I'm not being shifty-eyed. I'm not, telling tales. I'm just trying to manage what feels like I'm landing spaceships right now. I feel a little fancy, but we're going to do this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple of slides to kind of guide our time today. So let's see if I get this right. Now, mind you, if I don't get it right, I don't even want to tell y'all that we had a whole practice before y'all came on and I still got it wrong, but it's fine. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so let's start this from the beginning. So today, for a little bit, when we're talking about what marketers need to know about DEI, and this will by no stretch of the imagination be an all-consuming conversation, just a couple of things. We're gonna play the game, 2 truths and a lie. How many folks have played that as a kid? Hands up. Yeah. How many of y'all play that as adults? Never mind. Oh, Rocky said, listen, to this day, I might engage in a 2 truths and a lie. Well, a little bit of a fun spin, right, on some of the things and the misnomers that may be floating around in the DEI space as it pertains to marketing. So let's go. So the whole premise of this idea of two truths and a lie is based on this, based on whether or not as practitioners, as marketing practitioners and professionals, you believe these things. You believe that marketing has a social justice responsibility to promote values and ideals that respect human dignity, diversity, and justice, right? And how does that show up? It shows up with the 4 things that are listed there: socially conscious principles, societal marketing, social campaigns, and ethical values. I'm gonna give you a second to kind of look that slide over. A lot of words on the slide, because then I want to ask you a question. So the question would be, do you believe that? And so you can drop it in the chat. You can come off mute and say, do you believe that marketing has a social justice responsibility to promote values and ideals that respect human dignity, diversity, and justice? And there is no right or wrong answer. I just want a pulse check. So I can't see the chat. So my lovely, lovely assistant is going to help me, whatever is in the chat.
All right, so here's what we have. We have yes, yes, I believe, yes, 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 and of course, yes, yes.
Listen, there were no checks. I didn't pay anyone. I didn't Zelle. I didn't Cash App, PayPal, nothing. And everyone said yes, which warms my heart. And I'm going to tell y'all a true story. I asked this same question to a different group of practitioners in a different field. And through some honesty and transparency, some of them were a little bit on the fence. They just weren't quite sure or bought into the fact that it was their responsibility. They looked at their role in a much more transactional, using a transactional lens as opposed to a transformational lens. And so to hear that you all absolutely understand and lean into the fact that you have the ability, right? The blessing and the burden of being a marketing professional to lean into the transformational work that can happen, the way you can shift and uphold and amplify all different parts of community is a beautiful thing. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so we're going to get into our play for today, Two Truths and a Lie. So I'll ask a series of questions. You'll get the opportunity in the chat, thumbs up if you believe it's the truth, or thumbs down if you believe it's a lie. Y'all ready? Everybody ready? All right, here comes the first one. Truth or lie? Individuals are a combination of 2 dimensions of diversity. Thumbs up if you believe that that's true. Thumbs down if you believe that that's a lie. Agree or disagree? Okay, what's going on in the chat? What we got?
3, 4, thumbs down.
Okay.
5.
So 5 people think it's a lie and the rest think it's true.
6, thumbs down. No thumbs up yet.
No thumbs up. Okay. We finished voting. Some people was like, I don't know. I want you to tell me. Well, it's true, y'all. It's true. But I'm going to give you a little more on that, right? Because you're going to be like, heck no, people have got to be more than 2 things. Every individual is made up, the sum total of their lived experience can be traced, so to speak, back to 2 kind of dimensions of diversity: your core dimensions or your secondary dimensions. So for your core dimensions, you have things like age and ability and mental health, your economic background, your ethnicity, your faiths and beliefs and your value systems, your gender or your gender identity, and then your language or your use of your native language. And why these things come, they resonate as core are They are the things about us that are hard to change. It is usually the circumstance, the environment that we were born into. Now, later on in life, right, you can make some conscious decisions to do some other things and learn a new language and change your faith, or have different discussions about your gender identity. You can't change your age. I tried it. I'm holding on to 29, but it's not holding on to me, right? So, but these are the things that you cannot change. You were born into these things. They're harder to change. They often are the anchoring and the seeding. If you had to just really in your quiet time sit and try to figure out why you do the things you do sometimes without even thinking, it would probably lead back to your core dimensions. It is the way you experience the world, right? And there's a degree of inflexibility that comes about from these dimensions. Some of it is intentional, and some of it is kind of a blind spots. People don't even realize that they're doing it. And why that is very important is because as a marketer, when you are putting out collateral, when you are making sure that people are aware of something, whether you're selling a widget, where you're helping promote an event, whether you're looking at collateral, it is very important for you to understand your audience's core dimensions, right? And how that affects what you do or what you don't say. So for instance, ethnicity, heritage, and cultural background. For many African-American people, there is this negative connotation that has come through generations that is born out of the remnants of slavery and propaganda that has ensued thereafter, negative propaganda. And there was this adverse relationship with images of Black people and monkeys, right? That's the cold hard truth. And if you all remember, as marketers, you may remember H&M did a marketing campaign some years ago where they were talking about the new line of children's clothing that was coming out. Harmless, right? And so they had these different children. They picked a very diverse spectrum of children, accurately, as we could see, right? And they put them on the different shirts. And so one baby had on something with a giraffe, and one baby had on something with a bird, where they took the one Black child in this thing and put him in the sweatshirt of a monkey. And folks of color went crazy, and they just did not understand this because they didn't lean into and understand fully the core dimensions that a considerable segment of their population leans into when they did that, right? And who was sitting at the table to help them realize we might want to rethink that. So when you're thinking about who you're marketing to, what is it that you're trying to say, you can't avoid every landmine. Let me just go ahead and tell you all the truth. Sometimes it's just gonna happen. But you can mitigate the circumstances if you are intentional about understanding some of the core dimensions of whomever it is that you are seeking to market something to. The second dimension is called your secondary dimensions. And just like your core dimensions, you were born into, they are largely inflexible. They don't change. It is what it is. Your secondary dimensions, you have way more influence and control over them, right? Allegedly. Because I'm going to tell y'all that appearance and body type, I think I got control. But the way these Oreos got control of me, I beg to differ. I'm pushing back on that one, right? Because these Oreos got me in a chokehold, y'all. But secondary dimensions are all those things that flow into the rich tapestry that make up individuals that they can control, whether it's their citizenship status, their economic background, educational background, their marital or relationship status, their parental status, right? They can make some conscious decisions about those dimensions of diversity. And while they can, and they may not necessarily seem as ingrained, sometimes, depending on the population, and what secondary dimensions that they're really leaning heavily into, sometimes these secondary dimensions are more important than a person's core because they chose them. And so when you're looking at marketing and collateral, just consider those things. Even though they're not a core dimension, you might want to make sure that as much as you possibly can, your marketing stuff reflects the fact that people have the ability to choose all of these different secondary dimensions, right? And that they view the lens, they view the world through that secondary dimension lens. So basically with these two things, human beings are complex, right? And there's a lot that goes into, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm so sure. There's a lot that goes into when you're trying to find the sweet spot of something that's going to resonate with people based on their lived experience, based on their choices, based on the things that make them who they are, or populations as a whole. But you have to lean into this stuff. And the more you do it, and the more you get proximate, and the more you have those credible voices around you that can help decipher some of this stuff, the easier it gets. But as a practitioner, sometimes you have to say out loud, because I understand, and there have definitely been times when I have been working with our marketing professionals that many times you get an assignment, or there's an expectation that a lot of the blanks are filled in for some collateral that you're supposed to produce, a campaign that perhaps you're supposed to produce, and you feel it really boxed in, even though maybe it's a little something tickling you in the back of your brain, like, this might not be right. This is where you have to lean into knowing some of this stuff in your bravery to say, hey, can we pause for a minute? What about? Right? There's a level of bravery that has to emanate from marketing professionals, because you all are the bearers of narrative. You all play an integral part of how the world is experiencing other parts of the world that they can't get proximate to, through the way you show it, through the way you tell stories, through the collateral that you produce. And so there's an elevated responsibility there. So second one, here we go. Y'all ready? Y'all got your thumbs up if you agree that it's the truth, thumbs down if you think it's a lie. Online data collection for demographic detail is a valuable pathway. Going online and figuring out kind of tidbits about a population or a demographic that you don't know a whole lot is a valuable pathway. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, what we got?
We have 5 thumbs up so far.
Okay.
6, 7.
Okay.
And 1 thumbs down.
Okay. Interesting.
So 8 up, 1 down.
1 down. All right, here it is. Bam, it's true. Now, I know that people have all kinds of complicated relationships with the internet, and as they should, right? Because the World Wide Web is the playground for shenanigans sometimes. However, if used properly, it can absolutely be a great pathway for you to get information, for you to learn, and for it to spark curiosity. So using online data to kind of get an insight into a demographic or a population or a lifestyle that you're not necessarily familiar with, because that's not your lived experience, is good if you follow the following rules. That you use vetted, credible sources, right? And so, of course, the ones like, if you want to know about population and you go to us.gov, right? And you look at census information. But there are also other vetted, credible sources that the communities themselves will tell you, this is a good source to get an inside view about whatever it is you're looking for. So, for instance, there is an organization called Equity in the Center. And for a person of color who has experienced social injustice in this world, it is an amazing place to go for you to understand what those experiences are like, how often they're happening. For you, they take an unapologetic approach. You could really see how they use words, how they use tone, and decide if you do or if you don't want to use those things, but that's not necessarily a source that if you're not proximate to that community, if that's not your lived experience, would you have known about that source, right? So using vetted credible sources with the demographic it serves or disparages is going to be a great tip for you. So sometimes you got to ask folks, you just got to lean in, you got to be transparent and be like, I don't know, where would you suggest I look? I'm not asking you to teach me, because we'll talk about that in a second. I just want to know the credible places because I want to get the good information. And many times folks will lead you in the right direction. Using online data as a pathway is true if you use the data to become inquisitive. What you should really do is it should spark more questions, right? It shouldn't just be at face value and you think, okay, I saw this, I know the whole thing. I know all the goings-ons, I got the full picture. Absolutely not. It is flat Stanley. Do y'all guys remember flat Stanley, that little paper thing that little kids take home and put Stanley all over the place and take pictures? Stanley cute, but Stanley flat. Stanley is not 3, 4, or 5 dimensional, right? And sometimes data online is flat as well. You should use data to become inquisitive. So if you see something and you say, and it says that, 70-something%, and this is just an example, 70-something% of consumers under the age of 20 don't even look at XYZ. You should be like, why? There is something out there that will help you figure out why. Or if you're proximate to that population, now you have a specific question that you can ask them. Be like, it's my understanding that, people who identify as this don't necessarily go to this source for information. Can you tell me more about that? And one or two things will happen. They'll dispel and be like, that's BS. I go there all the time, right? And they could be an anomaly. Or they'll tell you, yeah, that's true, and this is why. So use data to become inquisitive. Don't use online data as the end all to be all. It should kind of send you down a rabbit hole. Using online data is very good if you use the data to educate yourself. So it is inherently ist, right? Blank ist, to ask a marginalized population to be your primary source of learning. Do y'all understand what I mean when I say an ist, right? It is sexist, racist, homophobic ist. It's not a word, but I needed to use it here today, right? To ask that marginalized population to be responsible for your learning. When you use online data to give yourself a primary education using credible vetted sources, baseline, then you have the wherewithal and ability to go and get close to those people and to understand better, right? To have those educated conversations, to understand how perhaps something that you were or were not doing in the marketing space was being helpful or harmful, even when you didn't realize it before. Many, many, many times, I fully believe deep down in my soul that many times when people do things that are harmful, it's not intentional, it's not malicious, it's a collateral damage kind of thing because they didn't know. And they just didn't understand that they were trying to knock this set of dominoes down and didn't realize that this set of dominoes would fall as well. And so use the data to educate yourself, to have these awakenings, to get at the visceral information that is definitely probably going to cause you to have some kind of reaction, and then you deal with that reaction, right? Like however you need to insulate yourself, however you need to deal, because there will be times when you are mining for data online and you are going to come across some stuff that is going to make you clutch your pearls, right? And you have every right to clutch your pearls, but don't make the clutching of your pearls and the comforting of that the responsibility of the marginalized population. So have that moment, push through it, think through what you want to know more about, and use that as the step to then engage with those marginalized populations. It's true if you diversify your consumption, and then it's true if you understand there is bias in online data. AI is a beautiful thing until it's not. It will give you things that it thinks you want to see, not necessarily all the other stuff that you need to see. So be mindful of that. You got to diversify your consumption. You got to get in and look at stuff that there are sometimes, y'all, that I have to go and I have to look at websites and I have to go and read books. I just have to understand perspectives that are personally vile to me, but it is absolutely fascinating in how it rounds out the framing for me to understand what's happening in any given space. And so make sure you diversify your consumption and make sure you understand that AI is going to toss at you all the stuff that it thinks you want to know. And sometimes you have to ignore that and dig a little deeper or go around. All right. So one last question. Bam, truth or lie? If you use a team approach for getting feedback or creating marketing strategy, you can avoid DEI pitfalls. Thumbs up if that's true. Thumbs down if that is not.
All right, so far we have 1 thumbs up and 3 thumbs down.
I love this group. Y'all ain't need me. We should have just got together and ate lunch and that's it. Cause y'all are spectacular. I love it. Oh, and the other 2 was truth. So this one had to be the lie, right?
Okay. Yeah, so we got 1, 2 thumbs ups and 1, 2, 3 thumbs down. And then the last thumbs down, there's also a note. All that is left is the lie, right?
Yeah, all that's left is the lie, unless I would be the lie, and I ain't trying to do that. Absolutely, absolutely. It is true. That is a lie. If your teams, right?
She's doing this interactive activity, which is really cool.
So
A lie.
If your teams are not, there it is. If your teams are not anchored in safe space rhetoric and behaviors, you cannot expect that team is going to help you avoid DEI pitfalls. So what does that mean? Glad you asked. You have to create spaces where people have to be able to call a thing a thing. They have to be able to say it out loud. And they have to not be fearful of repercussions, or they have to understand that even though you interject in a space and you may have your opinions, every time the team is not going to bend, right, to your opinion, but we heard you and it's valuable. And you have to make sure that people understand bravery is a 2-way street. We can do everything in our power to make sure that we create a space that is safe, but an individual has to be brave enough to say or do, right? It's a marriage, it's a dance, it's the 2-step, right? And so if your team is not anchored in safe spaces, if there's lots of rhetorical questions, if there's typically a leader of the group, they got a concept and everybody else in the group is like, this is just a formality, they don't really want our opinion, then no, you are not going, just because you use the team approach, you are not going to come up with strategies and narratives and collateral that will help you avoid DEI pitfalls. Remember H&M? They had a team that approved that marketing that consisted of people of color, but there was something in the environment and the constitutional makeup of that team that did not allow either those people of color to speak up or to be heard. The same thing happened with Gucci. And if you all notice a trend here that I'm all with retailers and clothing lines is true, because I love them, right? And I want to know more. So that's one thing. If you don't represent various lived experiences, your team is not going to have that holistic outlook. And if they don't even realize that they don't. And so many times people coalesce teams on fairly surfacey kinds of protocol, right? There's like, okay, you, and you, because y'all all look different, and bam, I got a diverse team. All 3 of them could have went to the same high school, grown up in the same neighborhood, went to the same college, come from 2-family households, or so what, they look different. Like their lived experiences are very much the same. And because of that, you are not going to get that holistic viewpoint, that discourse, right? Especially if you create this safe place for your group to make decisions that will help you avoid DEI pitfalls. I remember one time I was doing a presentation for a group of gentlemen talking about the merits of having a diverse group. And they were side-eyeing me, y'all, and just was like, here we go, here this lady go. We're diverse, of course we're diverse. And everyone here works, and they are, like, absolutely. The law of numbers will say that you will get people in, and no person, even twins, no two people have lived the exact same existence. You're gonna get some levels of diversity there. But for the most part, it was a fairly homogeneous group. And so at some point, I just had to say, would everyone please stand up? And when they stood up and they looked around the room, I didn't have to say anything else. Every single man in that room had on the same outfit: the polo shirt, the khaki pants, the brown loafers, right? And they just sat here and was like, oh, but we're a diverse group. Are we? Are we really, right? And so you have to be intentional about bringing people into the space that have various lived experiences, even if those lived experiences are contrary to your personal values and belief systems. You got to talk those things out. And then, of course, if you have a team that doesn't embrace discourse, sometimes teams need to tussle. That's what the seniors in Texas say. They need to tussle a little bit. They need to argue. Now, absolutely, there should be rules of engagement. Absolutely, there should be respect protocol. But sometimes that storming has to happen within a team setting for you to get to the forming and the norming phase, where you come out with really beautiful, really anchored, stuff that will help you, for the most part, try and avoid DEI pitfalls. Nothing is 100%. Let me just go ahead and take those rose-colored glasses off. There are going to be times that with your best efforts, you looked at your core and your secondary dimensions. You created spaces where teams could go back and forth and everyone could put in, and they could alert you to possible pitfalls. You did all the data mining and you checked it out with folks who that's their lived experiences, and you got proximate to stuff, and something may still happen. And it's fine, because when you do all those things, you are resourceful enough to navigate it, and you're credible enough to say what you said, right? And it's much easier to get through. You don't have to get into this back and forth of, I made a statement to pull back, I made a statement to do this, don't make a statement at all, change up, just swing the pendulum, and now all your collateral looks one way, or now it looks another way, or we're going to start doing this, or we're just going to completely stop. Like you allow yourself to have a much more balanced approach to the work, because you did all of the underlying work. And so let's talk. I would love to hear, because I am definitely not about sitting here on you all, but let's spend the next few minutes about something that you saw, something that you wanted to know, and let's chat about it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I want to see you all's faces. Yeah. So let's talk. What questions do you have?
Well, I just wanted to add that last point was really insightful for me, because I know that definitely here at the station where I work at, it's definitely easy to kind of get lost in the demographic of the team. We're all very similar. So it's easy for me to get lost when asking about like different things that we're doing as a team, or different things that I'm doing, and looking for advice, just getting a true outside perspective versus just getting perspective from people who have been doing it longer than me. So I think that was definitely really insightful, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you. It happens all the time. You're in a hiring process, you're putting together your all-star team, and you are looking for fit. Many times, whoever is the hiring manager is looking for fit, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. You want to bring people to the table who are going to be complementary. But that doesn't mean that they have to be the same. And our natural blind spot inclination is to see in others what we see and appreciate in ourselves. And that's when you get these fairly homogeneous teams, right? And so the true mark is for someone within that team to say, we are conscious that this, whatever fill in the blank, voice, this experience is missing. How can we credibly bring that in so we can make good decisions? When you just kind of ignore the fact, or you feel a ways, like you're personally affronted, particularly if you're the person who put the team together, if you're personally affronted by the fact and you feel like it's an allegation, that's where the collateral damage is. Now, the marketing narrative that will come from that team may not necessarily be as helpful and insightful as it can be. What other questions?
I don't have a question, but one thing that really had me thinking was something you said about having, a space where you all can really talk and be honest with one another. I've been in situations where I don't feel safe or trusted, and maybe I cannot get my real feelings or opinions out. So I just think that is so important, especially in the marketing world.
Yeah,
Don't tiptoe around things, right?
yeah.
Make sure your environment is suitable for that.
And it's not always the responsibility of either the leader by authority. Sometimes it's the leaders by influence that create that space. So I will tell y'all, the pendulum swung for me in my household when there were more children in there than there was adults. And so me and my husband had to be like, it's more of them. Like they could take over. We got to be smart about this, right? But in fact, it did. There are absolutely some things that we have the authority as parents to say, no, we're not going to do this, or yes, we are. But the children have the influence to sway the environment because it's more of them. And when they got together and they recognized the power that they had, there were certain things in our household that shifted. The same thing happens in many other spaces. So Martin Luther King, and everyone has their favorite Martin Luther King quote. Mine is, people will not remember the words of their enemies. They will remember the silence of their friends. If you are sitting in environments and you know that people are not able to lean into their bravery, or it's going to be weaponized, then folks got to come together and say something about that, right? And sometimes we're more fortified when we're talking on someone else's behalf as opposed to ourselves. And so when you find yourself in that, if you're feeling it, Brittany, somebody else is feeling it too. And you got to put it out there. Now, how you put it out there, that's a whole nother lunch and learn. We'll talk about that. And don't use my method sometimes, because don't use my method. I tell you what not to do. What I do that I probably should not do, but you gotta say it.
Rodrigua, we have a question in the chat.
Yes.
What are some good articles or books that you have come across that do a good job of highlighting diversity and representation in marketing?
You know what? I'm not sure if it's specific to marketing, but the principles translate. Stephen Covey has this book called The Speed of Trust. And I find that many times when there is some kind of conflict, when there is some kind of rub, when people kind of insulate themselves and don't want to be transparent and vulnerable and talk through things, when people just want to lean in and use the word tradition as a dog whistle, as a way to say, this is the way we're going to do it because I said so, right? As opposed to exploring new things. Deep down at the core is this idea of trust. People don't trust each other, they don't trust themselves, and they don't trust what's going to happen to them if they allow this, they don't allow this, they say that. And so I would highly encourage people to read that book, The Speed of Trust, because I think it could give you some insight when you're having these kind of push, pull, and tug where either you don't feel like you're being heard because you're trying to make a point about something that you all are trying to do that may not feel as inclusive and diverse as it should be, or when you're trying to get proximate to a community so you can learn more, so you can credibly represent them in marketing, it boils down to trust.
I don't have a book or an article to reference, but I would like to share a good example, I think, of representation in marketing. And Carrie, you can tell me if it's okay for us to share this when we send out our follow-up after our session. But at our AAF district conference this year, back in April, I attended one of the DEI sessions, and they highlighted a campaign that Nike did. And so the campaign showed ways that they show representation through gender, identity, body, and race. And I think we all have probably seen these. So the gender one was an example of Serena Williams. And so she's not the greatest female athlete ever. She's the greatest athlete ever. They showed a woman with a hijab, Nike check, on her head. And then Colin Kaepernick being highlighted in campaigns. That was an example of race. And then for body, showing different size models when we are in stores and we're looking at clothes, so that they're not all a specific size. But if it's okay, I'll ask if we can send some of these out as a reference. This session was put on by Google's head of brand. So he explained, diversity, equity, inclusion, gave examples of what great marketing examples could be and ways to think about it, ways for us to stretch ourselves as we're building the campaigns and looking around us. So I think this will be a great resource, and I'll have to double check if we can send it out with our follow-ups. Oh, Carrie's saying yes.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And vet it with those populations, right? Like when you come up with some collateral, find folks who identify with that and be like, talk to me about this. And you can't do it with everything. I understand that there are timelines and sometimes, but once you do it and you get a good sense, it will help influence down the line, and you won't have to do it as much because you'll get a much better sense. And fun fact, true story, I was in Mexico one time and these people thought that I was Serena Williams, and they followed me around and asked me for an autograph, and I gave it to them. I did. Not Serena Williams, but they thought I was. So, and they bought me cocktails. I was winning, y'all. They thought I was Serena Williams.
Someone else shared in the chat, Google's Inclusive Marketing Guide and Getty Images/Cities DEI Toolkit are good resources also.
Yeah. So PwC also has really small vignettes and videos that I think are amazing to watch for people to just think through blind spots and how you're personally affected by blind spots and how they could show up in that. That's another, and it has talking points if you all are talking about your team and how do you create environments where teams can have this honest discourse. Then they have like study guides and all that kind of good stuff that really helps people understand this notion of blind spots. Everyone has them. It's a function of being a human being. You just have to navigate through it.
Very insightful. Does anybody else have any other questions? I don't see anything else coming up in the chat. Carrie has something.
I have one. I always have questions. So I work at an ad agency, and quite often what happens is we go into the room with a client and there's a lot of sameness in the room, or there is a one that is different. How do we, as the agency partner, and maybe not the person who is different, become a good ally to recognize the difference and spark the conversation, even if we don't necessarily completely understand what needs to happen, just knowing that we know this isn't the right path?
Right. I think you're headed in that direction because it resonated with you that there was a one in the space. For as obvious as that may seem, I have absolutely been in places where that didn't even resonate with the group, that they just, this is the team we're working for, this is who hired us, this is what they said they want to do, this is who they brought to the table, and that didn't even resonate with them. The other thing that I can say is this is where you have to kind of educate yourself on the demographic that they're trying to market to, right? And if they're selling whatever widget and they're selling it in North Dakota, try to educate yourself as much as possible about who could potentially buy this widget in North Dakota, and keep dropping that information. Sometimes we think that people know and they have a clear understanding of what that community, what the population, what the demographic is, and they don't. And you all can usher them into a reality with truth telling, and use that as the way to open the door to some different conversation and ask the pointed questions. At the end of the day though, Carrie, I recognize that many times they're paying you as a thing, and you're not just going to walk away and not get your coins. I'm not advocating for that at all. However, I do think you have an elevated responsibility because you all are the SMEs. You will become the SME, the subject matter expert, when it's talking about marketing and creating these things for a successful outcome for your client, thinking through things that they don't think through because they're not the subject matter expert, right? You don't want them to come back and say, hey, you know, the goal was for us to sell XYZ more widgets. And you all knew that they were trying to sell to this population, but this population with the campaign they're approving, it's not going to resonate. They're not going to buy those widgets, right? So you got to say that. That's when you have to lean into your bravery and get coaching, get help on the use of language, how to say it, how to create spaces where people don't feel othered, and perhaps the one in the room will see fit to chime in, right? And when they do, girl, latch on to them and be like, yeah, tell me more. Like when they talk, let them have it, but don't pull them out, right? Because you never know what they have to go back to. But if they lean in, you lean in harder. But many times you have to just kind of stand bold in the fact that we're the SME. I'm going to tell you how this could or could not land, because you may not be seeing this, that, or the other thing.
I don't see any further questions, and I know we want to try to keep this to 45 to 50 minutes so folks can get a break and get ready for their next session or meeting they may have at 1 o'clock. So we just want to thank everyone for attending today.
Could I squeeze in one more question? Could I
Sure,
squeeze
Jeff.
in one more question?
Go ahead.
Thanks. I had my camera off. I was driving. Enjoyed the presentation very much today, Rodrigua. It seems like no matter how many people I meet, I still have more to learn. And when you were talking about internet research, I thought I heard you say the name of a website, and this is like, it sounds too good to be true, where I could read about the lived experiences of people who are different from me. Did you mention such a site? And if so, what is it?
I did. It's called Equity in the Center. And it is a repository of resources that really speak to social justice and systemic challenges that we have in this country. And you're absolutely right, Jeff. No one is going to know everything at any given time. They keep changing the rules of the game while we're playing it. We got to build a plane while we're flying it. However, there are some places where we can kind of get fortified and at least kind of sort of know what the conversation is about. And Equity in the Center is one of those websites.
Thank you.
We put that link in the chat for everybody.
Thank you.
So we want to thank everybody for attending today and give a couple reminders of some upcoming events we want you guys to save the date for. On November the 6th, we have our Headshot Happy Hour, and you can register through the AAF Roanoke website. And then on January the 28th, we have Taxes, Privacy, and You, our Government Relations Roundtable Luncheon, and that's on January the 28th. Again, you can register through the website.
Thank you all so much
Rodrigua,
for having me. I had an amazing time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, have a good remainder of the day.
Take care.
Great one. Thank you. Bye.